Imagine this. It's late in World War II, and the Pacific Ocean has become a battlefield stretching farther than the eye can see. The United States Navy dominates the seas. Carrier groups rule the sky. Battleships, destroyers, cruisers, all form an iron wall of firepower. Many American admirals quietly believe the war at sea has already been decided. Japan is cornered, its navy shattered, its air force crumbling. And then, something terrifying and unexpected appears on the horizon. Japanese pilots, flying damaged, outdated planes, begin diving straight into American ships, not attacking, not turning away, but deliberately crashing. And at first, American commanders laugh. They call it desperation, madness, futile suicide, something that will never change the outcome of the war. But then came Okinawa, and everything changed. This is the shocking story behind the title, Admirals Mocked Kamikazes until Okinawa Changed Everything. A story of pride, underestimation, horror, sacrifice, and the brutal reality of war in the Pacific. Before Okinawa, kamikaze, meaning divine wind, sounded more symbolic than real. A handful of suicide attacks had taken place in the Philippines, but many U.S. admirals saw them as random, uncoordinated, and ultimately ineffective. The mighty U.S. Navy still held radar superiority, massive anti-aircraft firepower, and fighter cover. So when whispers spread that Japan was now training pilots to deliberately crash their planes into ships, some high-ranking officers dismissed the idea outright. They saw these tactics as proof Japan had lost its professional military edge. A modern navy didn't need to fear aircraft flown by men who didn't intend to return home. Right, but those assumptions were shattered in 1945 as the U.S. prepared to invade Okinawa. Japanese command made a grim decision. They no longer had enough experienced pilots to fight head-to-head. They no longer had the aircraft numbers to challenge the U.S. fleet in open battle. So they focused on one terrible but simple goal: turning the plane itself into a guided weapon. Pilots were told their sacrifice would protect Japan, their families, their emperor. Some believed deeply, others were pressured. But the result was the same. Waves of kamikaze squadrons were unleashed toward Okinawa. At first, American captains reported spotting bogies, diving unusually fast, and not breaking away. Guns opened up, tracers filled the sky, and ships shook from near misses. But soon there were no near misses. There were direct hits. Planes slammed into destroyers, carriers, supply ships, radar, pickets, anything they could reach. Explosions ripped through steel. Fires spread instantly. Bombs detonated on board. And for the sailors witnessing it, the shock was indescribable. This wasn't a normal attack. These weren't dogfights. This was something darker. An enemy who didn't intend to survive the mission. Suddenly, the admirals who once mocked kamikaze desperation realized a terrible truth. Even a slow, obsolete plane, flown by someone who didn't care if they died, could become one of the deadliest weapons in the war. The Battle of Okinawa became the deadliest testing ground for kamikaze warfare in naval history. Radar picket ships, stationed far from the main fleet to warn of incoming aircraft, suffered most. They bore the first impact so the carriers would survive, and the price was horrifying. Day after day, pilots dove straight into ships, sometimes in groups, sometimes alone, sometimes slipping through clouds or hiding near friendly aircraft to avoid detection. Imagine the fear on board those ships. Alarms blaring, men racing to battle stations, gunners shouting target positions, fighters scrambling into the air. Every dot on the radar might be deadly. Every approaching aircraft might be the one that didn't turn away. Sailors described the sky as a blur of smoke, fire, and burning metal. A kamikaze could appear suddenly out of the sun, and in seconds, it was too late. The admirals who had once joked about suicide pilots now ordered drastic defensive changes. Anti-aircraft guns increased, radar systems expanded. Fighters were pushed further out to intercept earlier. Damage control drills intensified. Because at Okinawa, the United States Navy learned something chilling. These attacks could not be underestimated. Not anymore. Kamikaze strikes at Okinawa damaged or sank dozens of ships. Hundreds of sailors were killed. Thousands were wounded. Flight decks burned. Ammunition exploded. Oil fires raged across the water. Some ships survived only through heroic efforts of their crews, fighting flames for hours while the attack waves kept coming. The war at sea, once defined by maneuver, distance, and firepower, had become terrifyingly personal. And yet, the story isn't one-sided. Those Japanese pilots were also human beings, young men often barely trained, flying into near-certain death. Some wrote farewell letters. Some were moved by duty. Others were trapped by social pressure and military command. Their decision, voluntary or forced, reminds us of the extreme cost of nationalism, desperation, and total war. They were not mythical warriors. They were sons, students, friends, and their loss shows the tragic human cost behind the term kamikaze. For American sailors, the emotional impact was enormous. They watched men sacrifice themselves to destroy their ship, and they had to respond with deadly force. The stress, shock, and fear never fully left many survivors. The Kamikaze threat forced the U.S. Navy to adapt faster than ever, proving that even a dominant military force must respect the enemy's capability or pay the price. And that is why the phrase "Admirals Mocked Kamikazes until Okinawa changed everything" carries such heavy truth. It's a lesson in humility, a warning against underestimating desperation, and a reminder that war is not predictable. It evolves in brutal, unexpected ways. As the battle raged, the laughter stopped. Every kamikaze wave brought silence, grief, and reflection afterward. The cost was measured not just in ships and steel, but in lives on both sides. By the end of Okinawa, nobody in the Pacific Command doubted the power of suicide attacks again. Today, historians, researchers, and viewers still search for stories like this. Okinawa, 1945, Kamikaze, attacks U.S. Navy Pacific War, World War II, suicide pilots, emotional war stories, real, Pacific battle history, because they show the raw reality behind the headlines. They reveal courage, fear, trauma, loyalty, sacrifice, and mistakes. They remind us that war, isn't a game of statistics, it's a human tragedy. Through this story, we look back not to glorify war, but to understand it and to recognize the cost paid by sailors, pilots, officers, and families on both sides of the Pacific. If you're still watching, here's one simple CTA. Subscribe for more real stories from history that challenge what we think we know. And always remember, for the next video, visit the channel